Some stories begin with a storm, but this one begins with a knock. A quiet single dad, a Navy woman running from a burning past, and a little girl searching for safety. None of them knew that one rainy night would bind their lives together forever. And when that unexpected knock echoed through the dark, nothing they believed about fate, loyalty, or second chances would ever be the same. Before we begin, if you enjoy heartfelt stories about kindness, redemption, and the quiet heroes who still walk among us, we'd be honored to have you join our channel. Your support helps us bring more uplifting stories to you every week. Rain had a way of changing the sound of the world. For Jake Holloway, it softened everything: traffic noise, late-night chatter from distant porches, even the lingering ache in his chest that came and went like a tide. It was close to 11:40 p.m. when he turned his old Ford pickup onto County Road 17, the narrow stretch that led home. The wipers thumped in a steady rhythm, sweeping sheets of rain from the windshield as he drove through the darkness. Jake didn't mind late shifts. As a janitor at Milford Elementary and part-time maintenance man at the nearby VFW Hall, he'd taken whatever hours life gave him. Quiet hours suited him. Nights like this, cold, wet, empty, gave him space to breathe, space to think, space to remember, without drowning in memories. He turned down the radio to listen to the rain. Certain storms reminded him of his younger days, in the service, long nights spent guarding equipment in Afghanistan, storms rolling over the desert like dark oceans. But those memories were faint, now blurred by time. The most vivid memory left his wife's hand, in his frail and warm for the last time, never faded. He exhaled steady and deep, as if releasing the weight of the past into the rain-thick air. Then he saw them. At first, just two shadows in the distance blurred by the downpour. But as his headlights cut through the curtain of rain, Jake's breath caught in his throat. A woman, no, a Navy woman unmistakably in uniform, was hunched over, slightly shielding a little girl who clung to her side. They were soaked head to toe, running along the shoulder of the road as cars splashed past without slowing. Jake's foot slammed the brake before the thought even formed. The truck fishtailed slightly in the flooded asphalt, then steadied. Jake leaned forward, squinting through the rain. The woman staggered, catching her balance, then lifted the small girl into her arms. The girl's red dress, drenched and sticking to her skin, brightened briefly in the glare of Jake's headlights. "Good Lord," he whispered. He pulled to the side, hit the hazard lights, and shoved his door open. A wall of cold rain hit him instantly, soaking through his flannel shirt, but he didn't hesitate. "Ma'am," he shouted over the storm, "you need help." The woman turned toward him, hair plastered to her cheeks, breath shaking from exhaustion. Up close, Jake could see the insignia on her uniform, the subdued patch, the navy whites turned gray under the storm's assault. Her arms tightened protectively around the girl who buried her face into her mother's collar. I'm fine," the woman called back, though her voice said the opposite. "Our car, it died. My phone's dead too. We're trying to get somewhere with lights. You're 3 miles from the nearest house." Jake stepped closer, raising his arm like a makeshift shield. "Please, get in the truck. It's not safe out here." She hesitated only a second, the kind of hesitation trained into service members who grew used to standing on their own. Then she nodded. Jake opened the passenger door and helped her climb in, careful not to jostle the shivering little girl. He jogged back around and slid into the driver's seat, shutting out the roar of the storm. Inside, the world was quieter, but not by much. Rain hammered the roof, and the little girl's teeth chattered softly. Jake turned up the heat. "My name's Jake Holloway," he said gently. "You're safe now." The woman wiped rain from her eyes, still catching her breath. I'm Hannah Carter. And this is my daughter, Chloe." Chloe peeked up for the first time, big brown eyes full of confusion and fear. Jake offered her the faintest smile. "Hi there, sweetheart," he said softly. "You're gonna warm up soon." "Promise." Chloe tightened her arms around her mother but didn't look away. Something in Jake's voice, steady, warm, unhurried, seemed to ease her trembling. Hannah tried to compose herself, brushing hair from Chloe's forehead. "I'm sorry to trouble you. We were trying to get home, and the engine just died. Then the rain hit. Hard." "You don't have to explain anything," Jake replied. "I'm just glad I came down this road tonight." He put the truck into drive, easing back onto the pavement. Rain battered the windshield like fists against glass, but inside the cab, a fragile pocket of warmth grew. For a moment, the only sounds were the wipers and Chloe's soft breathing. Then, Hannah spoke, her voice low. "I just got back from deployment. It's been a long day." Jake nodded slowly. "I know a little bit about long days." Her eyes flicked toward him, filled with curiosity and caution. But she didn't ask more. Neither did he. Not tonight. Jake turned onto his street, a quiet lane lined with aging houses, tall oaks bending under the weight of the storm. When he parked in front of his home, Hannah looked at him as if unsure. "I can call someone from here," she said. "You've already done so much." Jake shook his head. "Chloe's soaked through, and you don't look much better. Come inside. I've got spare blankets, a heater, and hot soup. You can figure things out when you're warm." Hannah looked, conflicted pride and exhaustion battling in her eyes. But then a shiver ran through Chloe's small body, and her face softened with motherly instinct. "All right," she whispered. "Just for a little while." Jake stepped out into the rain again, came around the truck and held his jacket over Chloe as Hannah carried her out. Together, they hurried toward the porch, light glowing warmly against the darkness. In that moment, a storm raging around them, two strangers stepping into his quiet life. Jake felt something he hadn't felt in years, a shift, a beginning, a quiet knock from fate, arriving long before the one that would shake the rest of their lives. The porch light glowed like a small beacon against the storm, its soft amber hue spreading across the wet steps, as Jake Holloway guided Hannah Carter and little Chloe inside. Rainwater dripped from their clothes, forming scattered puddles on the old wooden floorboards. But Jake didn't seem to mind. He ushered them into the living room with a quiet gentleness, as if he knew from experience that people who were hurting didn't need questions, just warmth. "Sit wherever you like," Jake said, already heading toward the hall closet. "I'll grab towels and blankets." Hannah hesitated in the doorway, Chloe still clinging to her shoulder. The room was small, but inviting, a worn leather sofa, with a handmade quilt draped over the back shelves lined with framed photos, a fireplace filled with neatly stacked wood, and a lamp casting a buttery glow across the space. It felt like a place built by someone who had spent years learning to make peace with solitude. Chloe looked around with wide eyes, curious, now that she was no longer fighting the wind and rain. Hannah gently set her down on the couch. The little girl's red dress clung to her skin, damp and cold. "Mommy, it's warm in here," Chloe whispered, almost surprised. Hannah brushed her daughter's cheek, heart aching with relief. "Yes, sweetheart. We're safe." Jake returned with a stack of soft towels and a thick blanket. He knelt in front of Chloe, careful to keep his movements slow and non-threatening. "Mind if I help dry her hair?" Hannah nodded gratefully. Jake's hands, though calloused from years of labor, were gentle as he wrapped the towel around the girl's head and rubbed lightly. Chloe giggled a small, tentative sound that made Hannah's breath catch. It was the first laugh she'd heard from her daughter since the fire. "I'll get the heater going," Jake said. "And warm up some soup. Chicken noodle. Not fancy, but it does the trick." He moved to plug in a portable heater, adjusting its angle to face them. It hummed softly, sending waves of warmth across the room. Hannah's eyes followed him for a moment. She noted the quiet efficiency in his movements, the way he didn't hover or pry. This was a man who understood boundaries, a man who knew what it meant to carry burdens alone. "Let me help," she said, rising. Jake shook his head gently. "Not tonight. Tonight you and Chloe rest." The words were simple, but something about the tone, calm, assured, protective without being overbearing, went straight to Hannah's chest. She sat back down. Chloe, now wrapped in the thick blanket, crawled into her mother's lap. Her breathing steadied as the warmth enveloped her. From the kitchen, the clatter of a pot and the soft hiss of a stove burner filled the silence. It smelled faintly of thyme and slow-cooked broth. Hannah closed her eyes for a moment, letting the warmth and scent wash over her. After hours of fear, running, and uncertainty, her body finally began to unclench. Jake reappeared with 3 steaming mugs. Hot chocolate, he said, offering the first to Chloe. Extra marshmallows. Chloe stared at the floating marshmallows as if they were tiny miracles. "Thank you," she whispered. Jake smiled. "You're welcome, kiddo." He handed Hannah a mug, the heat warming her palms instantly. She took a sip. It tasted like something homemade, simple, comforting, the kind of thing people made when they cared. "I don't know how to thank you," Hannah said quietly. "You don't need to," Jake replied, sitting across from them. "Rainy nights have a way of bringing people together, sometimes for a reason." Hannah studied him. His flannel shirt was still damp, his hair dripping slightly from the rain. But there was a calmness in his eyes, a depth shaped by grief, resilience, and something else she couldn't quite name. "You live alone?" she asked softly. Jake nodded. "Since my wife passed. And since my daughter grew up and moved out. It's been a quiet house." "I'm sorry," Hannah whispered. He offered a gentle shrug. "Life leaves marks on all of us. But we keep moving." The honesty of his words lingered between them. Hannah felt a pang in her heart, not from sadness, but from recognition. She knew what it meant to carry pain without letting it crush you. She knew the weight of being both strong and lonely. They talked a little, nothing too heavy, nothing too personal. Hannah shared that she had just returned from deployment. Jake listened without interruption, nodding with a kind of understanding that suggested he knew the unnamed fatigue behind her words. And then, after weeks of guarded silence, Hannah found herself saying something she hadn't planned to say. "Our house burned down this afternoon." Jake froze. "The fire." She nodded, eyes glistening. "We lost everything." Chloe leaned into her mother, sensing the tremor in her voice. Jake set his mug down carefully. "I'm sorry, Hannah. Truly." Tears threatened, but she blinked them back. "I haven't told anyone yet. I don't know where to go tomorrow. I don't even know where to start." Jake didn't rush to offer solutions. His silence wasn't emptiness. It was understanding. It gave her space, the kind of space only people who knew grief could hold for others. "You start," he said softly by breathing. "Tomorrow we figure the rest out." The words steadied her more than he knew. Chloe, sleepy from warmth and chocolate, curled up beside her mother. Her tiny hand reached toward Jake unconsciously, fingers brushing his wrist. Jake's expression softened. "Looks like someone's feeling better." Hannah managed a smile. She hasn't laughed in days. Jake glanced toward the rain-splattered window, as if the storm had finally begun to ease. Kids know when the worst is behind them. Hannah followed his gaze. For a moment, the house felt like a sanctuary. Solid. Warm, protected from the chaos outside. As Chloe drifted off to sleep, Hannah allowed herself to exhale fully, deeply. She hadn't realized how tightly she'd been holding herself together until now. In the glow of Jake's living room, wrapped in warmth, safety, and unexpected kindness, she felt something shift inside her. Not love. Not yet. but the first seed of trust impossibly fragile and impossibly real. A warm light in the dark. The beginning of a new chapter neither of them knew they needed. The storm eased sometime after midnight, though the steady patter of rain still whispered against the roof of Jake Holloway's home. The heater hummed in the corner, the lights glowed low and warm, and the whole house felt wrapped in a cocoon of quiet safety. On the sofa, Chloe slept, curled against her mother's side, her breathing deep and even. Hannah Carter, exhausted but alert, gently stroked her daughter's hair. She watched the rise and fall of Chloe's small chest and felt her own body begin to release the knots of the past 12 hours. Meanwhile, Jake moved around the house with the sort of careful efficiency that only came from years of habit. He rinsed the mugs, wiped down the kitchen counter, hung their wet clothes on a drying rack near the heater, and did it all with a silence that didn't feel awkward, only considerate. Hannah found herself watching him more than she intended. There was something about the way he carried himself steady, calm, but with an undercurrent of heaviness, the kind people only carried after surviving things they didn't talk about anymore. She cleared her throat softly. "You don't have to clean everything tonight." Jake glanced over his shoulder. "If I don't, I won't do it in the morning." It was meant as a light remark, but Hannah sensed a truth behind it, as if keeping things in order was his way of keeping life from swallowing him whole. He walked to the living room and knelt in front of the fireplace, placing 2 logs inside. The soft crack of the wood echoed in the peaceful room. He struck a match, and soon a gentle flame began to grow, casting flickering light across the walls. Hannah watched, surprised by how comforting it felt to see a man so effortlessly domestic. Her late husband Chris had been wonderful in many ways, but the quiet tasks, the gentle ones, had never been his strength. Jake sat back on his heels, letting the fire catch. There, he murmured, "That'll keep the chill off." When he looked up, he found Hannah watching him. Their eyes held for a moment, long enough for her to sense a story behind his steady gaze, and long enough for him to notice the exhaustion hidden behind her strength. But Jake was a man who didn't intrude. He stood rubbing his hands on a dish towel and forced himself to break the moment before it lingered too long. "You're probably exhausted," he said. "You can take the bedroom tonight. I'll stay out here with Chloe." Hannah shook her head. "No, Jake. I can sleep on the couch with her. You've done more than enough." Jake didn't argue, but something softened in his expression. Not many people pushed back when he offered help. It told him something important about her, a protective instinct, a desire not to burden anyone even when she was running on empty. He sat in the armchair across from her, not too close, not too far. Rain tapped lightly on the windows. "You must have a family nearby," Hannah said gently. "Someone who can help when things get hard." Jake hesitated a nearly imperceptible pause before shaking his head. "Not anymore. Just me." "I'm sorry," she whispered. "It's all right," he replied with a faint smile. "Life moves in one direction. Forward." Hannah fell silent, but something about his answer tugged at her curiosity. "You mentioned your wife earlier," she said softly. "Do you mind talking about her?" Jake rested his elbows on his knees, staring into the fire. "Her name was Julia. She passed away about 10 years ago. Cancer." Hannah's heart tightened. "I'm so sorry," she said again, but this time the words came from a deeper place. She was the kind of person who made everything feel brighter just by walking into a room. Jake's voice stayed, even though there was gravity behind it. "My daughter Hope was 12 when Julia died. She's 22 now. Lives in Oregon, doing good. Better than I did at her age." There was a small smile on his lips, pride mingled with melancholy. "You raised her alone?" Hannah asked. "Yes, ma'am," he nodded. "I didn't always do it right, but I did my best. I'm sure you did better than you think." Jake looked at her, then really looked at her. The quiet sincerity in her voice, the compassion in her eyes moved something in him he hadn't expected to feel tonight. Before he could respond, Chloe stirred in her sleep, shifting closer to Hannah. She murmured something unintelligible and settled again. Jake watched them, mother and daughter, wrapped in a blanket framed by the fire's glow, and something unspoken passed through his chest. A longing he hadn't acknowledged in years. Not for romance, not yet, but for the warmth of a family, for the simple sounds of life lived in company rather than silence. Hannah noticed the way he was looking, soft, reflective, vulnerable. She lowered her voice. "You don't talk much about yourself, do you?" Jake let out a gentle laugh, almost embarrassed. "No. Never felt like my story mattered much." "That's not true," she said immediately, her tone firm but kind. "People don't have to do big, extraordinary things for their stories to matter." Jake lifted one eyebrow. "I clean classrooms and fix leaky pipes." Hannah shook her head. "You stopped on a rainy road to help a stranger and a child. You opened your home without hesitation. That alone says everything about your story." Jake had no reply, none he could form at least. So he nodded, grateful and uncomfortable in equal measure, unused to being seen so clearly. The fire crackled. Chloe breathed softly. Rain whispered against the window pane. For a few long seconds, the silence between Jake and Hannah felt companionable rather than awkward. Finally, Jake spoke, his voice thoughtful. "You should get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day." Hannah nodded, though her gaze lingered on him. "Thank you, Jake, for everything." He nodded once quietly. Any decent man would have done the same. But Hannah knew better. Not every man would have stopped. Not every man would have opened his home. Not every man carried grief with such dignity. As the firelight danced across his face, she realized she trusted this man, this stranger who never spoke of himself, more than she'd trusted anyone in a long time. And deep inside her chest, something fragile and unexpected began to stir. Not love. Not yet. But the first spark of connection, a quiet warmth in the presence of a man who didn't need to speak much to be understood. Dawn crept slowly into the quiet edges of Jake Holloway's home, painting the living room in soft hues of gold and gray. The storm had passed, leaving behind the clean scent of wet earth and the faint shimmer of raindrops clinging to the windows. The world outside was still, as if catching its breath after the long night. Inside the house held a rare peace, the kind that made people move, gently speak softly, and think deeper. Hannah Carter awoke to the warmth of a heavy blanket and the distant pop of wood in the fireplace. Chloe was still fast asleep beside her, cheeks flushed with the comfort of rest. Hannah lifted her head slowly, taking in her surroundings, and for a moment, she felt something she had forgotten, the sense of waking in a safe place. Jake was in the kitchen, quietly moving about the stove. He was making breakfast, judging by the soft clatter of pans and the smell of butter spreading over something warm. Hannah gently sat up, careful not to wake her daughter. She tucked the blanket around Chloe's small shoulders before rising. Her muscles ached, a reminder of running through the rain with a child in her arms, but her mind felt steadier than it had in days. Jake noticed her before she spoke. "Morning," he said, offering a small smile. "Hope you got some rest." "I don't remember the last time I slept this well," Hannah admitted, brushing her fingers through her damp hair. "Thank you, Jake, for everything." He shrugged, but the softness in his eyes contradicted his attempt at nonchalance. "Storms wear people out. Figured you needed a quiet morning." He slid a pan of scrambled eggs off the heat, then nodded toward the table. "Sit. I'll get the coffee." Hannah sat at the small wooden table, noticing the details she had overlooked last night. The chipped blue paint along the legs, the faint ring where someone once set a hot mug, the row of family photographs lined neatly on the shelf behind her. One photo in particular caught her attention. A little girl, maybe 10 or 11, with dark hair pulled into a messy ponytail, laughing as she hugged a golden retriever twice her size. Hannah smiled. "Is that your daughter?" Jake paused as he reached for the coffee pot. His expression softened. "Yeah, that's Hope. She used to follow that dog everywhere. She looks really happy." She was said, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. "Still is from the sound of her calls. Life's been good to her." "And you?" Hannah asked gently. Jake set the pot down. "Life's been steady." There was a quiet truth in his voice, a truth that made Hannah feel something deep in her chest. Before she could say more, Chloe stirred. She blinked sleepily, rubbing her eyes with both fists, before peering across the room. "Mommy. Where are we?" Hannah scooped her up. "Still at Jake's house, sweetheart. Remember, he helped us last night." Chloe looked at Jake, then at the blanket wrapped around her. "It's warm here." Jake chuckled. "That's the idea." He set a plate of eggs and toast on the table. "Breakfast is ready. Eat while it's hot." As they sat down, Hannah noticed something resting on the far end of the table, a small wooden box carved with intricate patterns along the edges. She hadn't seen it before. It was old, polished from years of touch, and delicate in a way that suggested it held something important. Jake followed her gaze. His jaw tightened slightly. "That was my wife's," he said quietly. "Julia's box." Hannah hesitated. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to pry." "It's fine," Jake replied. But the way he spoke, slow, almost reverent, told her the box wasn't something he showed often. Chloe, curious, asked innocently, "What's inside?" Jake looked at the box for a long moment before answering. "Memories." Hannah kept her eyes on him. "Would you like to talk about them?" Jake sat back in his chair, fingers tapping lightly on the table. For the first time since they'd met, something like uncertainty crossed his face. "I don't talk much about the past," he murmured. "Some things are easier left quiet." Hannah nodded. "I understand." But Chloe didn't. Children rarely did. "Did she like to draw?" Chloe asked, pointing at the carvings on the box. Jake smiled faintly. "Yeah, she did a little of everything. Painting, carving, writing. She was one of those people who made beauty wherever she went." Hannah watched him closely. The tenderness in his voice, the way he spoke about Julia, it was full of love, but not bitterness. Grief lived there, yes, but not the kind that consumed. The kind that had settled into the shape of a scar. Jake reached for the box, sliding it toward him. His fingers rested on the lid. "Julia used to say that memories were like seeds," he said, eyes distant. "Some of them grow wild, and some of them you have to plant carefully." "What does that mean?" Hannah asked softly. "That you can't choose what life takes from you," he replied. "But you can choose what you keep." The silence that followed was gentle, heavy, and strangely comforting. Then Jake opened the box. Inside were small treasures: a photo of Julia holding baby Hope in a hospital room, a letter folded neatly, edges worn, a dried flower pressed between paper, a thin silver chain with a tiny anchor charm. Chloe leaned forward, awestruck. "Is that your necklace?" Jake shook his head. It was hers. Hannah felt emotion tighten in her throat. "Jake, thank you for sharing this with us." He closed the box with care. "Most of this stays tucked away. But last night, I saw something in the way you held Chloe. Something familiar?" Hannah blinked back unexpected tears. "What's that?" "That same fight Julia had," Jake said gently. "The kind that keeps you going even when everything else falls apart." Hannah looked down at her daughter, stroking her hair. "I have to fight. For her." "I know," Jake replied. "That's why I didn't drive past last night." For a moment, the room held nothing but quiet understanding. Two people who carried loss, resilience, and unspoken burdens, finding a fragile bond across a shared table. The knock that would change everything hadn't come yet, but the door between their hearts had opened just a little, a crack of light, a beginning. The day unfolded slowly, with the sun climbing over the tops of the pines behind Jake Holloway's house, casting long beams of light across the kitchen floor. The storm had left everything dripping and fresh, the world washed clean, as if nature itself wanted to give them a new beginning. After breakfast, Jake called in to let the school principal know he wouldn't make his morning shift. Emergency at home, he explained in his calm, steady tone. He didn't mention Hannah. He didn't mention Chloe. He didn't mention the fear he'd seen in their eyes the night before, or the weight of exhaustion Hannah carried like armor. Some things didn't need to be said to be understood. Meanwhile, Hannah and Chloe settled into the living room, folding the blankets and collecting toys Jake had kept from his daughter's childhood. Chloe had discovered a worn teddy bear, missing one button eye, and instantly decided it needed a doctor. Jake found her in the corner, wrapping the bear in tissues and humming softly. For the first time since the fire, Chloe looked like a child, again, not a frightened survivor clinging to her mother's side. Hannah watched her daughter with a mix of gratitude and something deeper relief, the kind that loosened her shoulders and softened her chest. Jake returned to the living room with 2 mugs of fresh coffee. Cream and sugar, he said, offering one to Hannah. Just how you said you liked it. She blinked. I only mentioned that once. Jake shrugged. Some things are worth remembering. The warmth in his voice sent a small shiver through her. Not romantic, not yet, but something that hinted at the possibility of safety, a rare feeling in her life. They sat across from each other, coffee warming their hands, sunlight warming the room. You know, Jake said softly, I've seen storms do strange things. Knock trees down, wash out roads, rip shingles off houses. But sometimes storms bring people where they're meant to be. Hannah met his eyes. You really believe that I've lived long enough to see it happen more than once? His gaze didn't waver. It wasn't bold, but it was honest. Comforting. The kind of steadiness she needed more than she realized. But the peace didn't last. Around midday, as Hannah helped Chloe build a blanket fort in the living room, Jake stepped outside to check the mail, something he rarely bothered with before the afternoon. Habit, he supposed. Or maybe instinct nudged him, the same instinct that had told him to stop on the stormy road last night. The air chilled his damp shirt as he crossed the porch. He opened the mailbox and thumbed through a small stack of envelopes, advertisements, a newsletter from the VFW hall, an electric bill. And then his breath caught. One envelope was stamped with the crest of the United States Navy. His name was handwritten on it. Jake stared at it for several long seconds, heart tightening. He knew that handwriting. He hadn't seen it in years. Chris Carter, Hannah's late husband, had the kind of handwriting you never forgot, small, sharp, and precise, from years of filling out maintenance logs on ship hulls. But Chris had been gone for years. Jake stepped back inside the silence of the house, suddenly louder than the storm had been. Hannah looked up, noticing the change in his expression. Is everything okay? Jake swallowed, still staring at the envelope. I got something in the mail. Something I wasn't expecting. Her brows furrowed. From who? He handed her the envelope. Hannah stared at the crest, confusion turning to shock as she recognized the handwriting. She stifled a small gasp. Jake! That's Chris. Her voice trembled. Jake nodded. I know. Chloe, oblivious, kept playing with her teddy bear. The innocence in her small world made the moment even heavier. Hannah sank onto the couch, fingers shaking. Why would he write you? Jake sat down slowly across from her. His voice was quiet, steady, holding the weight of memory. Before he died, Chris and I served together on a deployment. We worked the same mechanical unit. We weren't just co-workers. We were friends. Hannah covered her mouth. He never told me. He wouldn't, Jake said with a gentle sorrow. He wasn't much for talking about feelings. Was he? That made her laugh soft. Sad true. No, he wasn't. Jake looked at the letter again, still unopened. I haven't seen his handwriting since the funeral. I don't even know what's in here. Hannah hesitated, tears brimming. Do you want to open it? For a long moment, Jake didn't move. The envelope felt heavier than paper should. It felt like a door to a room he'd closed years ago. Finally, he nodded. Hannah reached out, placing her hand gently on his, guiding him not as a widow, but as someone who understood the weight of loss. Together they opened the envelope. The paper inside smelled faintly of ship fuel and old ink, as if it had traveled a long distance, not through time, but through memory. Jake unfolded it. The words were simple. Jake, if this letter ever reaches you, it means I didn't come home. Hannah's breath hitched. Jake closed his eyes briefly, grounding himself. I want to ask you something I never had the courage to say out loud. If something ever happens to me, please watch over Hannah and Chloe, not out of obligation, but because I trust you more than any man I've ever served with. Hannah pressed a trembling hand to her heart. The letter continued. She won't ask for help. She's too strong for that. But she'll need someone good, someone steady, someone like you. If fate ever crosses your paths, don't turn away. Jake swallowed hard, voice cracking as he read the last line aloud. Take care of them, brother. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Hannah cried silently, not out of grief alone, but out of the staggering clarity of fate. Jake's eyes glistened too, though he blinked the tears away with quiet dignity. She whispered, voice broken, but full of wonder. He trusted you. Jake couldn't find his voice at first. When he finally spoke, it was barely above a whisper. And I won't let him down. The house was still, the air heavy. The letter lay between them like a bridge built from the past. The knock that would change everything had not yet come, but its echo was already forming in the distance. The letter lay open on the coffee table, its edges trembling slightly, in the faint draft drifting through the room. For a long while, Hannah Carter and Jake Holloway simply sat there, two people bound not by chance anymore, but by the last wish of a man who loved them both in different ways. Hannah ran her fingertips along the handwriting she knew so well. She had never seen this side of Chris's script before. It looked vulnerable, hurried like a confession whispered in the dark. She pressed a hand to her mouth, tears blurring the ink. Jake didn't move. His shoulders were square hands, clasped together tightly, a quiet storm churning beneath his calm exterior. Not sorrow alone, something deeper. Something like responsibility settling across his chest. Hannah looked up at him. I don't understand why he never told me about you. Jake's voice was low. He didn't want you to worry. Chris carried a lot on his shoulders. More than most knew. He was always like that, she whispered, always trying to protect everyone but himself. Jake nodded slowly. When he said he trusted someone, he meant it. He didn't trust easily. Hannah wiped her eyes. You two were really close. We were, Jake replied, eyes fixed on the letter. He saved my life once, pulled me out from under a collapsed engine cradle after an explosion. Didn't even think, just dove in. He paused, the memory flickering across his expression like a ghost. I never forgot that. Hannah swallowed hard. She had known Chris was brave, but hearing this from someone who had witnessed it, not in a folded flag or a prepared speech, hit her differently. More real, more painful. She gently folded the letter, hands trembling. Why would he ask this of you? Jake stared into the middle distance for a long moment before answering. Because he knew I'd keep my promises. There was something in the way he said it, soft, resolute, almost sacred, that tightened Hannah's throat. Jake wasn't a man of many words, but when he spoke with conviction, it felt like stone settling in place. Hannah exhaled shakily. He was right. Jake blinked, taken aback by her certainty. She continued, her voice steadier now. You didn't just help me last night. You helped my daughter feel safe again. You helped me breathe again. Her gaze locked with his, a fragile truth passing between them. You did exactly what he hoped someone would do. Jake lowered his head. I didn't know it would be me. I didn't think fate would line things up this way. Neither did I, Hannah whispered. Silence settled again, but not the uncomfortable kind. It was the quiet that grew between two people who understood each other's grief. Grief that didn't disappear, but softened when shared. Across the room, little Chloe had stopped playing with her teddy bear. She sensed the heaviness in the air, scooted closer, and climbed quietly onto her mother's lap. Her small hands reached for Hannah's cheeks. Mommy, don't cry. Hannah hugged her tightly, pressing her lips to Chloe's hair. I'm okay, sweetheart. Mommy's okay. Jake watched the mother and daughter wrapped in a circle of tenderness, and something in his chest shifted not painfully, but with the ache of recognition. Chloe turned to him. Jake. Did my daddy know you loved us? Jake inhaled sharply. Hannah's eyes widened. Kids had a way of asking questions with no warning, no buffer, no chance to prepare for the truth they deserved. Jake leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees, his voice steady but warm. Your daddy knew I respected him, and he knew I'd do anything to help the people he loved. He paused, choosing his words with care. He didn't want you two to ever feel alone. Chloe nodded solemnly, as if this answer satisfied a deep question inside her small heart. She reached over and put her tiny hand on Jake's wrist. Thank you for helping us. Jake felt something break open inside him, something soft, long buried. You're welcome, honey. Hannah watched the exchange, her heart tightening. The sincerity in Jake's eyes, the steadiness of his presence, the gentle way he spoke to Chloe, it all made her feel something she wasn't ready to name. But she could feel it. A warmth, a shift, a slow, unspoken invitation from fate. She glanced back at the folded letter in her hand. Jake. What Chris asked. It wasn't small. He was asking for something enormous. I know, Jake said quietly. And you're willing, her voice cracked. Jake looked at her, not with hesitation, not with obligation, but with the calm certainty of a man who understood the weight of promises and the worth of the people those promises protected. He asked me to take care of you, Jake said. Not to replace him. Not to fill a space I could never fill. Just to be someone you two could count on. Hannah's breath trembled. Jake continued softly. And I mean to honor that, however you need. Whatever that looks like. Hannah pressed a hand to her chest, overwhelmed. Jake, I don't know if I'm ready for anything big. I don't know what the future looks like. You don't have to, Jake replied. You just have to know you're not alone. Tears fell quietly down her cheeks, grief relief, gratitude all intertwined. Before either of them could speak another word, knock. Knock. The sound sliced through the stillness like a blade, loud, firm, unexpected. Chloe flinched. Hannah froze. Jake turned his head sharply toward the door. A second set of knocks followed, more insistent this time. Jake stood slowly, instinctively placing himself between the door and Hannah. His posture changed. Shoulders, squared eyes, alert, jaw set. Not aggressive, but protective. in a way that suddenly made Hannah feel both safer and more afraid. "Stay here," Jake murmured. Hannah nodded, pulling Chloe close. Jake stepped toward the door, each footfall measured and steady. He placed his hand on the doorknob, paused, and with a single breath opened the door to a man in full Navy uniform, rain dripping from his cap. Commander Jason Hale. He stood, rigid eyes, sharp. "Mr. Holloway?" he asked. Jake's expression didn't change. "Yes." Commander Hale nodded once. "We need to talk. Now." The knock had come, the one that would change everything. For several seconds, Jake Holloway remained perfectly still, blocking the doorway, with the quiet strength of a man who'd learned long ago how to face uncertainty head-on. Rain dripped from the brim of Commander Jason Hale's cap, tapping against the porchwood in a soft but steady rhythm. The storm had returned, not with thunder, but with tension. Jake didn't step aside. "What's this about?" Commander Hale's gaze flicked past him, scanning the living room behind Jake, with the alertness of a man trained to read danger in every corner. When his eyes landed on Hannah, Carter holding Chloe, he straightened further. "Lieutenant Carter," he said sharply, though the tightness in his voice held something deeper concern. "We've been searching for you." Chloe clung to her mother. Hannah rose slowly, her voice calm but cautious. "Sir, I'm here. We're all right." Commander Hale exhaled the tension in his shoulders, easing just a fraction, but his next words tightened a knot in the center of the room. "I need to speak with you both. Inside." Jake hesitated only a moment before stepping back, allowing the commander to cross the threshold. But he positioned himself near the door, close enough to intervene if instincts demanded it. Hale removed his wet cap, shaking off the droplets. He turned to Hannah first. "Your house fire wasn't an accident." Hannah's breath caught. "What are you saying?" A shadow crossed Hale's stern face. "Arson investigators believe it was intentionally set." Chloe whimpered, and Hannah held her tighter. Jake's voice cut through the heavy silence. "Who would do something like that?" Commander Hale hesitated. "We don't know yet. But we have reason to believe someone may have been targeting Lieutenant Carter, or at the very least watching her." Hannah pressed a hand to her forehead. "Oh, God." Jake stepped closer to her, steadying without touching. His presence grounded her more than the floor beneath her feet. Hale continued. "You two disappearing during the storm caused alarm. We feared the worst." "I didn't disappear," Hannah said shakily. "My car died. The storm hit. Chloe was freezing. Jake picked us up." Hale nodded slowly, eyes studying the man who now stood protectively at her side. "Then you owe him a great deal." "More than you know," Hannah whispered. Jake looked down, uncomfortable with praise, but Hale wasn't finished. "I reviewed some of Carter's personal file," he said to Jake. "You served in the same mechanical unit as her late husband." Jake nodded stiffly. "Chris and I go back a long way. And now you're the one who found his widow and child in a storm." Hale looked between them, expression unreadable. "It seems fate has woven a thread through all of this." Hannah swallowed hard. "Commander, what's going to happen now?" "We're arranging temporary housing," Hale replied, "but it won't be available until tomorrow morning. And given the situation, you shouldn't be alone tonight." He turned to Jake. "Mr. Holloway, would you be willing to keep them here until we have a secure location?" Jake didn't even blink. Of course. Hannah closed her eyes, overwhelmed with gratitude. Commander Hale straightened. "Good. I'll check in first thing tomorrow." As he reached for the door, he paused. "Lieutenant Carter, despite everything I want you to know, you handled yesterday with remarkable strength." Hannah nodded, tears shining in her eyes. "I did what I had to." "We all do," Hale said quietly, almost to himself. Then he stepped into the rain and vanished into the mist. Jake locked the door. The house exhaled, and everything inside it shifted. Chloe eventually fell asleep again, curled up in a nest of blankets on the couch. Hannah stood nearby, brushing the child's damp hair off her forehead. Jake watched from the kitchen doorway, arms folded, his expression softening the longer he looked at them. "That was a lot," he murmured. Hannah gave a shaky laugh. "Feels like my life in the last 24 hours. Jake stepped beside her, lowering his voice so as not to wake Chloe. "You're handling it better than most people would. I don't feel like I'm handling anything," she whispered. "I'm just trying not to fall apart." Jake's eyes softened. "Falling apart doesn't make you weak. Staying standing after everything you've been through, that's strength." Hannah felt her heart tremble at the gentleness in his tone. Jake continued, "You can stay here as long as you need, not just tonight, for however long it takes to get back on your feet." Hannah's breath hitched. "Jake, you don't even know us." He looked at her, really looked at her with the kind of sincerity that didn't need polishing. "I know enough. I know your daughter trusts you. I know you've been through hell and you're still standing. And I know Chris wanted someone to look out for you." He paused. "I'm honored to be that person." Hannah pressed a hand against her chest, her voice trembling. "You're an extraordinary man, Jake." Jake lowered his gaze, a shy, almost boyish humility crossing his face. "Just trying to do what's right." Later that evening, Hannah helped Jake fold a few sheets and blankets for the guest room, formerly Hope's room. Toys still sat neatly on the shelf, and a soft lilac paint color washed the walls in a gentle hue. "It's beautiful," Hannah whispered. Jake smiled faintly. Hope picked the color, said it made her feel calm. Hannah touched the wall lightly. "It feels safe." Jake paused, then offered something he rarely shared. "This house always felt too quiet after they left. Too big for one man." Hannah turned to him. "Maybe some houses aren't meant to be empty." Jake's eyes met hers, and something warm flickered between them. Not romance yet, but the promise of connection. A soft stirring neither wanted to disturb. He cleared his throat. "If you need anything tonight, anything at all, I'll be right down the hall." "I know," she said softly. "And that makes all the difference." As she tucked Chloe into the small bed, Hannah looked around the room, feeling hope, fragile but real bloom inside her, like a flower reopening after a long frost. Jake stood in the hallway, watching quietly. Hannah stepped toward him, stopping just a breath away. "Thank you," she whispered, voice full of meaning. Jake nodded, unable to speak, past the emotion tightening his throat. He watched her return to the room, watched the soft light fall on her and her daughter, and realized something he'd tried to avoid admitting. For the first time in years, his house felt like a home again. Because kindness, not architecture, was what real homes were built from. And kindness was something Jake had never run out of. Morning came softly to the Holloway house. Quiet light filtering through thin curtains, casting long bars of gold across the living room floor. The world outside was peaceful again, washed clean by the storm. Birds perched on branches outside the kitchen window, shaking droplets of water from their wings as though beginning again. Inside, Hannah Carter stood at the counter, pouring water into the kettle, moving with a slow caution that came from sleeping in an unfamiliar place. But there was something different in her posture this morning, less tension, less fear. She had slept in Hope Holloway's room with little Chloe, and although the night brought memories of the fire, it also brought warmth, comfort, and safety she hadn't felt in years. When she turned, she found Jake Holloway already awake, already working. He was on the back porch repairing a broken slat on the wooden railing. Sleeves rolled up, his movement steady and methodical. Even from a distance, there was something grounding about him, like watching a man not just fix wood, but hold the world together piece by piece. Hannah stepped out barefoot, holding 2 mugs of coffee. The morning air was crisp, but the sun warmed the porch. "You start working before the day even begins, don't you?" she said, offering him a mug. Jake smiled a little, accepting it. "If I don't fix things when they break, they just stay broken." Hannah leaned against the railing beside him. "I'm starting to learn that from you." He gave her a soft glance, just enough to let her know he'd heard the layers beneath her words. For a moment they stood in companionable silence, sipping coffee and watching sunlight ripple across the damp grass. Hannah wrapped her free arm around herself, thoughtful. "You know," she said quietly, "I didn't realize how lonely I'd gotten. Deployment, single motherhood, Chris being gone. It's like I've been walking with a wall around me." A tall one. Jake listened, not interrupting. "And last night," she continued, "I felt something shift. I felt like maybe I didn't have to hold everything together alone anymore." Jake lowered his mug, his expression softening. "You don't. Not here. Not with me." Her breath caught not because of romantic pressure, but because the words were so simple, so honest, and so rare. Later in the morning, Chloe woke and came bounding into the kitchen with the unbridled energy of a child who had finally slept peacefully. Her hair stuck out in several directions, and she clutched the patched-up teddy bear like a treasure. "Mr. Jake," she said, shyly, tugging his sleeve, "can you help me find breakfast?" Jake crouched to her level. "I thought you'd never ask." He opened a lower pantry drawer, where he kept cereal and snacks for visiting kids in the neighborhood, something Hope had once insisted he do for her friends. Chloe gasped in awe, as if discovering a secret treasure chest. "You have the good cereal," she whispered reverently, holding a box of honey oats. Jake grinned. "Only the best." Hannah watched them from the table, her heart tightening in a way that wasn't painful, just unexpected. Seeing Chloe bond with someone so effortlessly, it felt like watching a piece of her daughter's spirit return. As they ate, Jake asked Chloe gentle questions, nothing intrusive, nothing heavy. "What's your favorite color? Do you like drawing? Does your teddy have a name? Or should we give him one?" Chloe answered each with shy seriousness, then rewarded every question with a small smile, the kind that reached her eyes. After breakfast, Jake suggested they step outside. "There's something I want to show you both." Hannah followed him into the backyard, a space she hadn't seen yet. It was wide and open, filled with tall trees and wildflowers. The morning sun made the grass sparkle with leftover raindrops. Near the back fence stood a small treehouse, worn but sturdy, perched on 4 thick beams. It had a tiny balcony, a wooden ladder, and a window shaped like a crooked heart. Chloe gasped. "It's a castle," Jake laughed. "Hope and I built it when she was 7. She wanted a place to read where no one could interrupt her." Hannah touched the wooden frame. "It's beautiful. I haven't been up there in years," he said softly. "But it's yours now. Both of you, if you want it." Chloe's eyes filled with wonder. She hugged Jake's leg, surprising him. "Thank you," she whispered. Jake froze for a split second, caught off guard by the tiny arms squeezing him, then gently rested a hand on her back. It was such a simple gesture, but there was something transformative about it. Something healing. Something that made Hannah's eyes sting with emotion. Later, after Chloe climbed into the treehouse to explore Hannah, and Jake walked the yard, the sunlight filtered through leaves, dappling the ground with shifting patches of gold. "You're so good with her," Hannah said softly. "She hasn't warmed to anyone this fast since Chris." Jake walked with his hands in his pockets, shoulders relaxed. Kids know when someone sees them, not just looks at them, but really sees them. "And you do?" Hannah asked. Jake met her gaze with quiet honesty. I see both of you." Hannah looked away, overwhelmed. "It's been so long since anyone has." Jake paused beneath a tree, leaning against the trunk. "You don't have to be strong every minute, Hannah." "I don't know how not to be," she admitted, voice trembling. "I've spent so long holding everything together. I don't know what it feels like to lean on someone else." He stepped closer, but not too close. Close enough to offer warmth, not pressure. "Then lean a little," he said softly. "Just a little. I'm not going anywhere." A tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly, embarrassed. Jake shook his head. "Don't hide that. Not from me." For the first time in years, Hannah let the walls around her heart loosen. Not fall, not crumble, just loosen. Enough for light to slip in, enough for her to breathe. She whispered, "I'm scared, Jake," I know he said. "But you're safe." Their eyes held an unspoken promise forming gentle as morning light. Not love, not yet, but trust. A fragile, beautiful trust that belonged only to them. As Chloe called from the treehouse for them to come see the treasure, she found Jake and Hannah walked toward her side by side. And for a brief, fleeting moment, it felt like they belonged in that backyard, in that morning, in that life. Together. The afternoon sun filtered softly through the lace curtains of Jake's living room, scattering delicate patterns across the hardwood floor. Hannah Carter sat on the couch, a warm cup of tea cradled between her palms, while her daughter Chloe played quietly nearby with the patched teddy bear. The steady crackle of the fireplace gave the house a comforting hum, the kind of sound that made even the heaviest heart feel a little lighter. From the kitchen came the faint noise of tools clicking together, Jake Holloway fixing the loose handle on an old cabinet door. Every few minutes, a soft thud or a small grunt echoed through the house, and each time it did, Hannah felt a faint tug in her chest, a strange, blooming warmth. There was something about watching a man take care of his home, take care of the small things, take care of her and her daughter, without asking for anything in return. It stirred emotions she thought she had buried forever. She set down her tea, rising to check on him. The kitchen door creaked gently as she stepped in. Jake was kneeling by the cabinet, sleeves rolled up, revealing the firm lines of someone who worked with his hands for a living. His concentration was complete, brow knitted slightly, jaw set in that familiar, determined way she'd come to recognize as Jake, just being Jake. "You don't have to fix everything," she said softly. Without looking up, he answered in his usual quiet way. "If something's broken, I fix it. It's just what I do." Hannah leaned against the counter, arms folded softly. "Sometimes things aren't broken," she said. "They're just tired." Jake paused. Then he looked up at her with thoughtful eyes. "You talking about cabinet doors? Or about people?" Hannah smiled a small, fragile smile. Maybe both. Jake's eyes softened. He set aside the screwdriver, rising to stand in front of her. The faint scent of sawdust and soap clung to him, familiar and steadying. "You know," he said, "most people break quietly. They don't make a sound until someone finally notices the pieces." Hannah lowered her gaze. "I've been trying so hard not to break, Jake." "I know." His voice gentle as a warm hand on a cold night wrapped around her. "You don't have to hold everything up alone." There it was again, that steady comfort, that unspoken promise he kept giving her without asking anything in return. The sincerity in him felt like something she could depend on, something solid enough to lean on. Jake. She hesitated, searching for the right words. "Chris trusted you. Chloe trusts you. And I do too." Jake let out a slow breath, as if those words settled something deep in his bones. "I won't let you down," he said quietly. Before she could answer, Chloe's bright voice carried through the doorway. "Mommy, look. What Jake made me." She raced into the kitchen holding a wooden trinket, something small carved from leftover wood. It was a tiny heart with a little anchor etched into the center. Jake rubbed the back of his neck, a little embarrassed. Just a little something. Thought she might like it. Chloe held it up proudly. It's my lucky charm. Hannah felt her heart swell. Not from romance, not from longing, but from witnessing kindness so pure it felt like sunlight seeping through cracks she thought would never mend. "Thank you, Jake," she said softly. He smiled at Chloe. "You're welcome, kiddo." Later that afternoon, Hannah offered to help Jake tidy the garage. He hesitated at first. Most men guarded their garages like old battlefields, but eventually agreed. "Just don't judge me," he muttered. "I won't," she laughed. They worked side by side, sorting through old boxes and weathered tools. At the bottom of a dusty crate, Hannah found a small collection of items: childhood drawings, crayon marks on scraps of paper, faded ticket stubs. She picked up one drawing, a little stick figure girl holding hands with a taller stick figure man. Above it, in big, wobbly letters, read, "Me and Daddy fixing things." Hope Hannah's breath hitched. It was simple. It was imperfect. It was everything. "She made that when she was 5, Jake said, standing behind her. "Used to follow me everywhere with a hammer made of foam." Hannah turned the drawing over gently in her hands. "She loved you so much." Jake nodded, a quiet sadness in his eyes. "Still does. Just from far away now." There was a raw tenderness in the way he said it. A father missing his child. A man who had learned to let go even when it hurt. Hannah felt her throat tighten. "You must be proud of her." He smiled, soft, wistful. "Every day." Hannah placed the drawing back in the box carefully, like it was something sacred. When she met Jake's eyes again, something had shifted inside her. Respect, warmth, connection. Something deeper than before. Something that scared her. As evening settled in the sky, washed itself in shades of pink and lavender, Jake suggested they all sit on the porch to watch the sunset. Chloe bounced excitedly, dragging a blanket with her. The three of them settled into the old porch swing, the wooden frame creaking gently as they rocked. Chloe snuggled between them, resting her head on Hannah's shoulder. The quiet of the evening, the warmth of the fading sun, the comfortable closeness of the three of them, it all blended into a moment that felt strangely complete. A family. Not by blood, not by promise, but by presence. Hannah watched as Jake pointed out different shapes in the clouds for Chloe. Animals, ships, castles. His voice was warm, playful, full of surprises she hadn't expected from a man so quiet. And somewhere between a cloud shaped like a carousel and one shaped like a dragon, Hannah's heart gave a small, unmistakable shift. A soft return, a gentle thawing, a quiet awakening she could no longer ignore. She didn't say it aloud. She didn't have to. She simply knew. Her heart, scarred, weary, and afraid, had begun to return to her. And it had started returning the moment Jake opened his door on a stormy night. Evening draped itself gently over the Holloway home, quiet and unhurried. The porch swing had stilled. The sky had surrendered its lavender tones to the deep blue of approaching night, and the first stars were beginning to blink awake, like lanterns hung across a vast, dark ceiling. Inside the house felt warmer than usual, alive with something invisible, but unmistakable. Jake Holloway noticed it as he wiped down the kitchen counter. Hannah Carter noticed it as she tucked a now sleepy Chloe into Hope's bed. Even the house itself seemed to notice, creaking softly, in ways old homes often do when they're content. After Chloe finally drifted to sleep, Hannah stepped into the hallway and found Jake adjusting the thermostat. "She's out," Hannah whispered, her voice carrying a kind of softness that made Jake's heart tighten. "Didn't even make it to the second bedtime story." Jake smiled. "She's had a big week." Hannah leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed loosely. "So have I. Her eyes lingered on him longer than necessary, long enough for Jake to see the flicker of gratitude, of trust, maybe even the ghost of something deeper. And he felt it too, that quiet, undeniable shift inside him, subtle, but powerful as a tide. "I can take the couch tonight," Jake said. "You should get a solid sleep." "You've already given us so much," Hannah murmured. "I don't want to take your bed again." "You're not taking it," he said gently. "I'm giving it." Their eyes met. Something warm passed between them, something neither had planned for, but both had begun to welcome in their own guarded ways. "Jake," she began softly, "I don't know how we'll repay you for everything." "You don't have to repay kindness," Jake replied. "You just have to accept it." Hannah swallowed, her eyes shining. "I'm trying. I really am." He nodded. "That's enough." The moment lingered quiet, fragile, almost luminous. And then, knock. Knock. The sound cracked through the tranquility like lightning splitting open a calm sky. Hannah froze. Jake's jaw tightened. Every muscle in him stood alert, instinctive and immediate. It wasn't the gentle sort of knock someone used for neighborly visits. It was firm, intentional, and at this hour, unsettling. Jake moved first. "You stay here," he said, quietly, steady but commanding. "I'll get it." Hannah nodded, heart thudding. "Jake, be careful." He offered a reassuring glance, though a flicker of tension crossed his eyes. "Always." Jake stepped toward the door with purposeful strides, each step deliberate, measured. He didn't switch on the brighter overhead light, only the lamp near the entryway, enough to see, not enough to reveal too much. Another knock echoed through the house. Jake placed a hand on the doorknob and opened the door. Standing beneath the porch, light rain dripping from the brim of his cap, was Commander Jason Hale. But this time, he wasn't alone. 2 uniformed officers stood behind him, posture rigid, expressions serious. "Mr. Holloway," Hale said, voice tight. "We need to come in." Jake stepped aside without a word, instincts sharp as a blade. Hale and the officers entered, bringing with them a gust of cold night air and something heavier urgency. Hannah appeared in the hallway, hugging her arms around herself. "Commander." "What's happening?" Hale removed his cap, his expression grave. "You're not in trouble," he said, immediately, seeing the fear in her eyes. "But there are things you need to know." Hannah's breath caught. "Is it about the fire?" "Yes." Hale gestured to the sofa. "Please, sit." Jake stood near the doorway, arms crossed, ready to step in if needed. The officers kept a respectful distance, but their presence was unmistakably protective. Hale took a breath. "We received preliminary findings from NCIS investigators this afternoon. The fire at your home." He paused. It was no accident. Hannah shut her eyes, the truth hitting her harder this time. "I don't understand. Who would want to hurt us?" Hale exchanged a subtle look with one of the officers before answering. "We believe it may be connected to a case your husband was involved in shortly before his death." Jake straightened. "What kind of case?" "A corruption investigation," Hale said. "Chris was helping gather evidence. If someone suspected, his family might still have something. Or knew something." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Hannah's face drained of color. He never told me anything." "You were never meant to be part of it," Hale replied gently. "But someone may think otherwise." Jake stepped forward. "So, what now?" Hale's tone shifted more resolute. "Now, we protect you. All of you." He opened a small folder and placed it on the table. Inside were temporary relocation approvals, emergency support documents, and a list of safe houses. "We have a secure location ready for you starting tomorrow," Hale continued. "But tonight, this house is the safest place you can be. We've posted personnel nearby. No one will get close without us knowing." Hannah's eyes darted to Jake, silently asking a question she couldn't voice. Jake answered without hesitation. "You're staying here. Both of you." Hannah's eyes filled. "Jake, I don't want to put you in danger." "You're not." His voice was firm. "You're not alone. Not anymore." For a moment, everything stilled the officers. The commander, the room itself, as if the world paused to acknowledge the weight of his promise. Then Hale stepped forward, lowering his voice. "Lieutenant Carter." "There's one more thing." Hannah's heart thudded painfully. "What is it?" Hale reached into his coat and pulled out a sealed envelope, official, crisp, and marked with urgency. "This just came in from the Board of Personnel." He handed it to her. "Your transfer request. The one you submitted months ago." Hannah blinked in confusion. "I never filed a transfer request." Hale nodded. "But Chris did. Before he deployed." Hannah gasped, hand trembling as she took the envelope. Jake stepped closer, protective instinct pulling him toward her. With shaking fingers, Hannah opened it. Inside was her new assignment, a transfer to a naval facility in the same city. No more long deployments, no more months away from Chloe, a chance at stability, a future she didn't dare dream of. Tears spilled silently onto the paper. Jake placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Hale spoke softly. "He wanted you to have a life where you could raise your daughter safely." He set it in motion. And now it's finally come through. Hannah covered her mouth, overwhelmed. "Oh my God." Jake's voice was low, steady. "He took care of you. Even now." Hannah looked up at Jake, tears glistening, something powerful blooming behind them. "No," she whispered. "You're the one taking care of us." Jake swallowed hard, emotion rising like a tide he didn't know how to fight. Hale observed the moment with quiet respect. Then he said the words that would echo long into the night. "That knock on the door wasn't danger." "Hannah," he paused, "it was the beginning of your new life. And in that instant, surrounded by fate, fear, protection, and newfound hope, Hannah realized he was right. Because sometimes a knock didn't break a life open. Sometimes it opened the door to everything you never thought you'd receive again. The house was quieter than it had been all day, but it wasn't the unsettling quiet that Hannah had grown accustomed to since losing Chris. This was a peaceful silence, the kind that settles over a home, after profound news, after shared tears, after the world shifts its weight onto a new foundation. Commander Hale and the officers had left the porch, light glowing in their wake like a small guardian. Outside, the night air held a chill, but inside, the warmth lingered soft, steady, almost palpable. Hannah Carter sat at the wooden kitchen table, her fingertips gently resting on the transfer letter. She had read it 4 times, yet each time felt unbelievable. A transfer. A new post. A new life she could actually build, and not alone. Across from her, Jake Holloway leaned against the counter, arms folded across his chest. Not guarded, not stern, just present, solid, like the earth beneath a heavy storm. "You holding up?" Jake asked softly. Hannah exhaled not a sigh of despair, but one of release, like a knot untangling for the first time in years. "I don't know what I'm feeling yet, but it's something good, I think." Jake smiled faintly. "Good as a start." She looked at him, eyes shimmering. "Jake, everything changed so fast. I don't know how to process it." Jake walked to the table, took the chair beside her, not across from her anymore, but next to her. "You don't have to process it tonight. You just have to breathe." Hannah let out a small, trembling laugh. "You've said that before. And it's still true." Their eyes held warmth, meeting warmth, understanding, meeting, understanding. It was the first time in years Hannah didn't look away. She didn't have to. Chloe appeared in the doorway, sleepy-eyed teddy bear in hand. She blinked. "Mommy, Jake." Jake knelt gently. "Hey, kiddo. You okay?" Chloe nodded. "Can I stay here? I don't want to go anywhere tonight." Jake smoothed her hair. "You're staying right here, I promise." Hannah watched the way Chloe leaned against him, small arms wrapping around his neck, and something deep inside her cracked open, not with pain, but with possibility. Possibility she didn't dare imagine before. Jake carried Chloe back to the bedroom and tucked her in, humming softly under his breath, a tune he said he hadn't sung since Hope was little. Hannah stood in the doorway, watching silently, tears gathering in her eyes. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't forced. It wasn't dramatic. It was gentle. It was real. It was the moment she knew her heart had space left to love again. When Chloe finally drifted back to sleep, Jake joined Hannah on the porch. The wooden swing swayed lightly in the night breeze, and they sat side by side, wrapped in the quiet rhythm of the evening. Above them, stars spilled across the sky in silver clusters. For a while they didn't speak. Then Hannah whispered, "When Chris died, I thought the world would never look bright again. I thought that chapter was over forever. And then, everything else happened. The fire, the fear, the running. I felt like life was closing every door." Jake nodded slowly. "Life has a way of doing that sometimes. And then you opened yours," she added. Jake's breath tightened. "I didn't do anything special. I just—" "No," Hannah cut in gently. "You did something extraordinary. You gave me kindness without asking for anything. You gave Chloe safety. You gave both of us a place to breathe again." Jake stared at the horizon. "I didn't expect any of this. I didn't expect to matter like that again." Hannah turned to him. "You do matter, Jake. More than you know." She waited for the grief to cross his face the way it always did when people got too close. But tonight, something else flickered there instead. Hope. Recognition. A cautious opening. "Can I ask you something?" Hannah said softly. "Anything. Why did you stop that night?" Why, as Jake looked down at his calloused hands. Habit, I guess. Or instinct. Or Chris. He paused, voice tightening. Maybe something in me knew that night wasn't just any night. Hannah reached out slowly and placed her hand over his. His fingers tensed, then relaxed beneath hers. "I think you were meant to be there," she whispered. Jake lifted his gaze to hers, searching her expression, as if trying to decide whether he deserved the meaning behind her words. "And I think Chris knew you'd show up," she continued. "He trusted you more than anyone. And now, I do too." Jake swallowed emotion rising like a tide he fought to contain. "You don't owe me anything, Hannah. Not trust. Not gratitude. Not more." "I know," she said gently, "and that's why I give it freely." The porch swing swayed. The night breeze brushed her hair. Jake's heart thudded a quiet, steady rhythm against the weight of the moment. "Hannah," he whispered, voice breaking slightly, "I don't want to cross any lines. You've been through so much, and She squeezed his hand. "Jake, you're not crossing anything." The silence that followed was full, not empty, overflowing with everything they weren't ready to say yet, but no longer afraid to feel. Jake finally nodded a slow, humble acceptance. "Okay." Hannah leaned her head lightly against his shoulder, and Jake didn't move away. He exhaled a breath years overdue and rested his cheek gently against her hair. They didn't embrace. They didn't kiss. They didn't rush. They simply existed together under the same roof, under the same sky, under the same quiet blessing of survival and second chances. After a long while, Hannah whispered, "Jake, are you sure you're ready for this? For us, for everything that comes with us?" Jake closed his eyes. "I've been alone for a long time, and I've healed slowly, piece by piece. But tonight, Tonight, I feel like I'm finally ready to live again." Hannah smiled through tears. "Then maybe we can learn together." Jake turned slightly, just enough for their foreheads to touch. It was tender, gentle, reverent. Together he murmured. Chloe's faint laughter drifted from inside the kind children make in their dreams when they know they are safe. Jake and Hannah stayed on the swing until the stars blurred and the house settled into a deeper stillness. And as the night wrapped around them like a warm blanket, they understood without speaking, without defining, without rushing, that the storm which brought them together had not torn their lives apart. It had rebuilt them, aligned them, led them home. A new beginning under the same roof. And for the first time in a long, long time, hope didn't feel like a memory. It felt like the future. Before you go, we'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from tonight? Our community is filled with people from every corner of the world, and your stories, your experiences, and your presence truly matter to us. If this story touched your heart, we'd be honored to have you join our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing more uplifting healing stories about kindness, courage, and the quiet heroes who remind us that goodness still exists. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you for spending your time with us today. We appreciate you more than you know, and we hope to see you again in the next story.